The car world is full of legends. Mustangs, Corvettes, and Camaros dominate headlines, auctions, and Instagram feeds. But lurking in the shadows are cars so strange, so brilliant, or so outright mismanaged that they've been forgotten by history. Some are jaw-droppingly fast, others are astonishingly ugly, and a few are just plain insane. Here are 15 hidden car gems you won't believe exist, the overlooked oddities and marvels that make you wonder why anyone ever let them leave the factory.
Dear viewer, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thanks for your support.
Number 10. When Buick introduced the Riviera in 1963, it marked a bold new direction not only for the brand, but for American automotive design as a whole. It was not a chrome-laden land yacht, nor a stripped-down muscle car. It was a refined, powerful grand touring coupe built to blend European sophistication with American presence. The result was one of the most beautifully executed cars of the 1960s, the Buick Riviera. The Riviera's origins traced back to General Motors' ambition to build a car that could rival the elegance of European Grand Tours like the Ferrari 250 GT or Aston Martin DB4, yet still carry the size, comfort, and character of an American luxury coupe. Chief designer Bill Mitchell, inspired by Italian coach builders and British luxury, envisioned the Riviera as a knife-edged design, crisp, lean, and free from the exaggerated fins and clutter that had defined 1950s cars. When the Riviera debuted in 1963, it was immediately hailed as a modern design triumph. Even Sergio Pininfarina, the famed Italian designer, reportedly called it one of the most beautiful American cars ever built. The 1963 Riviera broke all the stylistic conventions of its era. Clean, uncluttered lines replaced the flamboyant chrome and tail fins that dominated earlier American cars. Hidden headlights were integrated into the grille, a first for Buick, adding a mysterious, aggressive front profile. The angular roofline and taut body proportions created a balanced, sculpted look that gave the car a motionless elegance even when parked. At just over 17 feet long, it looked poised, athletic, and unmistakably luxurious. The Riviera managed to look European in restraint, yet American in confidence, a rare design harmony that few cars achieved then or since. Beneath the sculpted hood lay Buick's 401 cubic-inch nail-head V8, producing around 325 horsepower and 445 pound-feet of torque, serious performance numbers for 1963. The engine's small-diameter valves and high-torque characteristics gave it explosive mid-range acceleration, perfect for highway cruising. Power was sent through Buick's twin-turbine Dynaflow automatic transmission, delivering smooth, almost imperceptible shifts. While not a lightweight sports car, the Riviera could still reach 0 to 60 miles per hour in under 8 seconds, impressive for a near 2-ton luxury coupe. The result was a car that could glide with poise and accelerate with authority, the ideal combination for American grand touring. Step inside a 1963 Riviera and you're greeted with an atmosphere of understated opulence. Bucket seats and a center console gave it a sporty cockpit-like feel. The real walnut trim, chrome accents, and aircraft-inspired controls spoke of precision and class. Sound insulation and a carefully tuned suspension gave it a whisper-quiet ride, while power steering and power brakes made it effortless to drive. Buick understood that true luxury wasn't about being loud or showy. It was about refinement. The Riviera embodied that philosophy perfectly. Unlike most American luxury coupes of the era, the Riviera was built for control. Its crisp steering, firm suspension, and balanced weight distribution made it surprisingly agile. The front and rear coil springs provided both comfort and composure, a blend that few competitors matched. Buick engineers tuned the chassis for high-speed stability, making the Riviera an ideal interstate cruiser. Road testers of the time often compared it to high-end European GTs, praising its composure and confidence at speed. The 1963 Riviera wasn't just another Buick. It redefined what an American luxury car could be. It influenced countless designs across GM divisions and even competitors like Ford's Thunderbird and Chrysler's 300-letter series. The Riviera marked Buick's shift toward the personal luxury car segment, appealing to younger, affluent buyers who valued both style and performance. Even decades later, it remains a favorite among collectors and designers for its perfect proportions and timeless lines. When Bill Mitchell was asked about his favorite creation, he often named the Riviera alongside the 1963 Corvette Stingray, both masterclasses in balanced design. The 1963 Buick Riviera stands as one of the greatest American car designs of the 20th century. It represented a turning point when American manufacturers began to value aesthetic restraint, proportion, and international style over mere flamboyance. Even today, it's admired not just by classic car enthusiasts, but by modern designers who see it as an example of how simplicity can convey strength, elegance, and emotion. The 1963 Buick Riviera remains an icon because it achieved something rare, a perfect balance of beauty, power, and sophistication. It wasn't just a luxury car, it was a statement of taste. Where other cars shouted for attention, the Riviera spoke softly and carried 325 horsepower. It was, and still is, an American masterpiece of automotive art. Number 9. Before Detroit defined the term muscle car, before the GTO and the Mustang became icons of speed and style, there was the 1957 Studebaker Golden Hawk, a bold, beautiful, and brutally fast machine that defied its small-town origins. It was a car built by a struggling independent automaker that dared to out-muscle giants like Ford and Chevrolet. By the mid-1950s, Studebaker was fighting an uphill battle. The South Bend Company was one of America's oldest automakers, tracing its roots back to building wagons in the 1850s, but by 1955 it was drowning in competition. General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler dominated the American market with ever bigger, flashier, and faster cars. Studebaker, with its limited budget, couldn't compete on volume, so it decided to compete on innovation and audacity. The result was the Golden Hawk, introduced in 1956 and refined for 1957. It became the fastest, most powerful Studebaker ever built, and one of the quickest American cars of the decade. At first glance, the 1957 Golden Hawk looked like it had been designed to fly rather than drive. It was based on the handsome Loewe coupe body introduced earlier in the decade, a design originally styled under the influence of French industrial designer Raymond Loewe, who believed cars should express motion even when standing still. But by 1957, the Golden Hawk styling had evolved into something more aggressive. A bold, upright grille, inspired by contemporary Mercedes-Benz designs, gave it an authoritative front profile. Finned rear fenders and a sculpted hood with a central bulge hinted at the power beneath. Chrome spears, two-tone paint, and gold accents reflected the mid-century obsession with luxury and flash. It was a curious blend of refinement and muscle, a gentleman's hot rod, before that term existed. What truly set the 1957 Golden Hawk apart was what lived under that sculpted hood, a supercharged 289 cubic inch V8 producing 275 horsepower, an astonishing figure for its time. This wasn't a massive displacement engine like those found in Cadillacs or Chryslers. Instead, Studebaker engineers fitted a McCulloch supercharger, essentially a belt-driven compressor, to boost the relatively small engine's power output dramatically. It gave the Golden Hawk 1 horsepower for every 10 pounds of weight, matching or beating the mighty Chrysler 300B and Chevrolet Corvette of the same era. In 0 to 60 miles per hour tests, it achieved times as quick as 7.8 seconds, making it one of the fastest American cars of the 1950s. The Golden Hawk's acceleration was shocking for an era when most family cars struggled to reach 60 in under 14 seconds. This was, in spirit, the first American muscle car, a mid-size coupe with a big, boosted V8 and a focus on street-line power. The Golden Hawk was more than just numbers, it felt powerful. With nearly 300 horsepower on tap and a weight advantage over its Chrysler rivals, it delivered brutal acceleration for the time. However, its handling reflected both its ambition and its flaws. The heavy supercharged V8 over the front axle made steering nose-heavy. Drum brakes struggled to rein in its speed on long descents. Its short wheelbase and high torque made it a handful in corners, thrilling but not forgiving. Test drivers described it as explosive in a straight line, unnerving in a curve. Still, that raw, untamed performance only added to its legend. It was a car that demanded skill and rewarded courage. Inside, the Golden Hawk was trimmed more like a luxury car than a drag racer. Studebaker wanted its drivers to feel sophistication alongside power. Plush leather or vinyl interiors, machine-turned dash panels, full instrumentation, including a tachometer, rare in 1957, and a jet-age steering wheel that felt like something from an aircraft cockpit. It was designed to look and feel like a car for successful, daring individuals, not teenagers or street racers. Studebaker marketed the Golden Hawk as America's most advanced high-performance car, and for once, the slogan was true. It offered Corvette-like acceleration in a 4-seat luxury coupe. But there was a problem: public perception. Buyers in 1957 didn't quite know what to make of it. It wasn't a luxury sedan, and it wasn't a pure sports car. It lived in a gray zone that wouldn't truly exist until the muscle car boom of the 1960s. And while enthusiasts praised its power, many ordinary drivers found it too aggressive, too expensive, or simply too different. By 1958, Studebaker's financials were deteriorating, and the Golden Hawk's production was discontinued after only a few thousand units. Looking back, the 1957 Studebaker Golden Hawk stands as one of the most visionary American performance cars ever built. It anticipated an entire era of muscle and speed that wouldn't officially begin until a decade later. It taught the automotive world that you didn't need a massive engine to make massive power, that a small company could innovate faster than the corporate giants, that performance and elegance could coexist in one package. Many automotive historians today see the Golden Hawk as the spiritual ancestor of cars like the Pontiac GTO, Ford Thunderbird, and even the later Dodge Charger. The 1957 Studebaker Golden Hawk was more than a car. It was a last stand of American independence and imagination. Built by a small company running out of time, it delivered world-class performance, timeless design, and a sense of daring that few larger automakers dared to match. It was the car that roared before the world was ready to listen. A supercharged prophecy of what American muscle would one day become. Number 8. By 1971, the muscle car era was burning at both ends. Insurance rates were soaring, emission standards were tightening, and the golden age of high-octane American performance was running out of road. But before the party ended, Plymouth released one last unfiltered, unapologetic machine, the 1971 GTX 440. This car was not just another member of Chrysler's performance family. It was the last true Mopar powerhouse built before the regulations and reality of the 1970s strangled American muscle for good. Let's take a closer look at the car that defined the end of an era. By the dawn of the 1970s, the American car industry was facing an identity crisis. The late 60s had given us icons like the Roadrunner, the Charger RT, and the Hemi Cuda, raw, roaring beasts with engines meant for drag strips, not commutes. But 1971 marked a turning point. Emissions controls and unleaded fuel were being phased in. Insurance companies began penalizing high-power horsepower cars. And fuel economy suddenly became a concern as gas prices climbed. Amid this shifting landscape, Plymouth decided to go out swinging. The GTX 440 would be the company's last statement of uncompromised muscle, a rolling declaration that power still mattered. The 1971 Plymouth GTX shared its body with the redesigned Satellite and Roadrunner, but it stood apart with sharper details and more upscale touches. This was a car that looked fast, standing still. A loop-style front bumper framed by twin headlights gave it a bold, predatory face. The hood bulge with optional air grabber intake wasn't just for show. It fed cool air directly into the monster beneath. A wide, muscular stance combined with flowing lines and subtly flared fenders gave the GTX a perfect blend of brawn and beauty. Inside, it was surprisingly refined. The GTX wasn't a bare-bones street racer. It was marketed as a gentleman's muscle car, offering bucket seats, wood grain trim, and a full array of gauges that spoke more of power and prestige than teenage rebellion. Under the hood lived the soul of the GTX, Chrysler's legendary 440 cubic inch Magnum V8, delivering 370 horsepower and 480 pound-feet of torque. To put that into perspective, this massive engine could launch the 3,900-pound GTX from 0 to 60 miles per hour in under 6 seconds, with quarter-mile times in the high 13s. Extraordinary numbers for a factory-built full-size car in 1971. The optional 426 Hemi remained available that year, rated at 425 horsepower, but it was extremely rare and cost-prohibitive. For most buyers, the 440 Magnum was the perfect balance of ferocity and reliability. The GTX's 727 Torque Flight Automatic was bulletproof, and the Sure Grip differential put power to the pavement with minimal wheel spin, though in truth, tire smoke was part of the experience. This was a car that didn't just move, it lunged forward like a predator. One of the most overlooked strengths of the 1971 GTX was how comfortable it was compared to its rivals. Thanks to its long wheelbase and torsion bar front suspension, the GTX could cruise smoothly at highway speeds, soaking up bumps and road imperfections better than most muscle cars. But the moment you tapped the throttle, that civility vanished. The 440 Magnum delivered a wall of torque that could pin you to your seat and leave lesser cars trembling. Steering remained heavy, typical for the era, but predictable. The GTX wasn't a nimble sports car. It was a brute in a tailored suit, designed for straight-line authority. With powered disc brakes up front, it stopped reasonably well for a 4,000-pound beast, though fade was still a concern under hard use. Despite its performance, the 1971 GTX 440 struggled in sales. Only around 2,900 units were built that year, a steep decline from the car's late 60s heyday. Why? The timing was terrible. The market for muscle cars had evaporated almost overnight. Insurance companies classified the GTX as a high-risk vehicle. Fuel prices and emission standards were turning buyers to smaller, more efficient cars. And Plymouth's own Roadrunner, cheaper but nearly as fast, stole much of the spotlight. By 1972, the GTX name was gone as a standalone model. It would only return as a trim option on the Roadrunner, a shadow of its former glory. Today, the 1971 Plymouth GTX 440 stands as one of the last authentic Mopar muscle cars before the performance collapse of the 1975s. It represented the peak of an era, when engineers cared more about horsepower than emissions, and when cars were built for sound, sensation, and sheer speed. Its blend of luxury and performance made it unique among its peers. Unlike the bare-bones Roadrunner or the flashy Charger SE, the GTX parried itself with restrained aggression, a car for the driver who wanted class and chaos in equal measure. Collectors recognize it now as a turning point in American automotive history, the final year when Plymouth dared to build a car purely for thrill, before regulations and economic pressure forced the muscle car underground. The 1971 Plymouth GTX 440 was the last muscle car to embody the full Mopar spirit: big block power, rear-wheel fury, and fearless design. It didn't compromise for comfort or conformity. It existed to dominate the open road. When the 440 Magnum thundered to life, it wasn't just an engine sound. It was a declaration that even as the world changed, American muscle would not go quietly. Number 7. The 1955 Chrysler 300 wasn't just another mid-century cruiser. It was the car that proved an American manufacturer could build something to rival Europe's best GT machines while maintaining the comfort and presence that American buyers craved. In the early 1950s, Chrysler was known more for engineering conservatism than excitement. But that changed in 1955 with the introduction of the Chrysler C300, the first in the legendary Letter series. Under the hood was a 331 cubic inch Hemi V8, producing then astonishing 300 horsepower, the most powerful production car in America at the time. This figure wasn't just marketing fluff. The 300 name itself came directly from that horsepower rating. It could reach 60 miles per hour in under 10 seconds, and top speeds of 130 miles per hour were achievable, numbers unheard of in 1955 for a full-sized luxury coupe. To put this into perspective, in an era when a Chevrolet Bel Air made around 162 horsepower and a Ford Fairlane barely pushed 180, the Chrysler 300 was a rocket ship. The Chrysler 300 wasn't merely fast in a straight line, it was built to handle. It borrowed heavily from Chrysler's Imperial chassis, giving it a stiff, solid structure. Engineers lowered the suspension, added heavy-duty springs and shocks, and fitted larger brakes to rein in all that power. This made it one of the few American cars of its time that could both go and stop with confidence. At Daytona Beach in 1955, the Chrysler 300 made its mark by dominating NASCAR's Flying Mile, clocking 127.58 miles per hour, faster than any production car that year. It went on to win 27 major stock car events that season, cementing its reputation as the king of American performance. Simply put, the 300 wasn't a showpiece, it was a thoroughbred. Stylistically, the 1955 300 was understated but powerful. Based on the Chrysler New Yorker body, it was clean, elegant, and muscular without being garish. The bold egg crate grille, long hood, and sweeping rear fenders gave it a stately, almost predatory stance. There were no fins, no gimmicks, no chrome excess, just proportion, purpose, and poise. The 300's subtlety made it stand out even more in a decade that often leaned toward flashy design. Inside, the car was all business. A luxury cockpit with leather seats, full instrumentation, and a steering wheel that looked borrowed from an airplane. Chrysler understood that true power didn't need to shout, it just needed to deliver. What made the Chrysler 300 so unique was its balance. It wasn't a stripped-down racer or a soft luxury barge, it was both. Buyers could cruise in near-silent comfort on the highway, yet unleash the kind of performance that would humble almost anything on the road. This was the dawn of a new American philosophy, the performance luxury coupe. The 300 was the spiritual ancestor to cars like the Buick Riviera, Ford Fairlane, and even the later Dodge Charger and Pontiac Grand Prix. Chrysler had proven that performance and sophistication could coexist beautifully. The success of the 1955 300 kicked off a dynasty. Each following year saw a new letter car, 300B, 300C, 300D, and so on. Each one faster, more refined, and more exclusive. These cars became status symbols for executives, racers, and enthusiasts alike. By the time muscle cars emerged in the 1960s, Chrysler had already written the playbook. The 300 showed that Americans didn't have to look to Ferrari or Jaguar for a car that could excite the soul. They could find it right in Detroit. The 1955 Chrysler 300 wasn't just another post-war automobile. It was a declaration. It said that America could build a car of power, elegance, and durability, one that could challenge the world's best and win. It bridged the gap between luxury and performance long before others even thought to try. It was the first real gentleman's muscle car, a car that didn't just go fast, but did so with class, composure, and confidence. And to this day, when enthusiasts speak of great American legends, the name Chrysler 300 still commands respect. Because in 1955, it didn't just set a new standard, it created one. Number 6. The 1973 Pontiac Grand Am. Long before the badge became synonymous with plastic-bodied 1990s commuters, the original Grand Am was a bold, refined experiment, an American attempt to capture the feel and flair of a European sports sedan while keeping the heart and soul of Detroit muscle. By the early 1970s, the golden age of muscle cars was ending. Emissions laws, insurance costs, and the coming oil crisis forced American automakers to rethink performance. Pontiac, once the proud maker of GTOs and Firebirds, found itself in a corner. How do you build a car that's exciting but refined enough for a new era of regulations and rising fuel prices? Enter the 1973 Grand Am, a car that aimed to combine European road manners with American muscle and luxury. Pontiac described it as the grand touring car America has been waiting for. It was, in essence, Detroit's answer to BMW and Mercedes. The Grand Am's design was a statement of intent. Built on the A-body platform shared with the Le Mans, it featured a distinctive Endura urethane nose, a soft, body-colored front end that eliminated the traditional chrome bumper. This not only gave the car a smoother, sportier look, but also improved aerodynamics and gave it a European flavor reminiscent of Jaguar or Maserati designs. The long hood, sloping rear deck, and semi-fastback roofline gave the car a sleek, aggressive profile. Twin hood scoops and louvered taillights added muscle without excess. The styling was elegant but purposeful, a true blend of power and poise. Inside, Pontiac went all in on sophistication. Real walnut veneer trim, aircraft-style gauges, bucket seats, and a thick, European-style steering wheel. It was marketed as a driver's car, not just another boulevard cruiser. Pontiac engineers wanted the Grand Am to feel like a European Grand Tourer, not just look like one. The suspension was tuned for tighter control, with front and rear stabilizer bars, variable rate springs, and radial tires, a rarity in American cars at the time. The result was one of the best handling Pontiacs ever made. Under the hood, buyers could choose between the 400 cubic inch, 6.6-liter V8 or the mighty 455, 7.5-liter V8. Though emissions controls had reduced raw power, both engines still offered tremendous torque. The Grand Am could cruise all day at highway speeds with smooth confidence, something few American cars at the time could do comfortably. Road testers in 1973 praised its stability, cornering balance, and solid road feel, describing it as American brawn with European brains. Unlike many muscle-era cars that emphasized speed at the expense of comfort, the Grand Am was built to pamper. It came standard with features like power steering, power brakes, reclining bucket seats, a full-gauge cluster, and optional air conditioning. The car's insulation and build quality were also higher than typical GM A-bodies, aiming to provide a quieter, more solid ride. Pontiac even introduced a radial-tuned suspension RTS setup, tuned specifically for radial tires, that significantly improved cornering and ride quality. This system would later become a selling point across the GM lineup. Despite its many strengths, the Grand Am arrived at a terrible time. The 1973 oil crisis made buyers wary of large V8 sedans, no matter how refined. With fuel prices skyrocketing and emissions tightening, the market for high-performance luxury cars evaporated almost overnight. Pontiac only sold about 43,000 units in 1973, and the numbers fell even further in the following years. Production ceased after 1975, though the name would return later, stripped of its original spirit in the late 1970s and again in the 80s and 90s as a compact commuter car. The original Grand Am's blend of performance and luxury was too sophisticated and too thirsty for a market suddenly obsessed with fuel efficiency. While sales were disappointing, the 1973 Grand Am left a lasting impact. It pioneered design and engineering ideas that would influence Pontiac's future models, including the Grand Prix and Firebird Trans Am. The concept of an American sports sedan, fast, luxurious, and comfortable, would later be perfected by brands like BMW and Audi, but Pontiac had taken that bold step first. Today, collectors and enthusiasts look back on the original Grand Am as a symbol of ambition, an American automaker daring to think globally even as the industry stumbled into crisis. Its styling, ride quality, and personality make it one of the most underrated cars of the 1970s. The 1973 Pontiac Grand Am was more than just another mid-sized car from Detroit. It was a declaration of intent. It represented a new idea, that American cars could offer the sophistication of European grand tourers without abandoning their muscular roots. It was Pontiac's bridge between the muscle era of the 1960s and the performance luxury movement that would define the decades ahead. Unfortunately, timing wasn't on its side. But in the grand story of American performance, the Grand Am stands tall as the car that tried to teach Detroit how to handle, how to refine, and how to dream differently. In short, it was America's European dream on four wheels. Number 5. The 1962 Oldsmobile Jetfire. This car was a technological leap, an ambitious, futuristic machine that introduced turbocharging to American streets years before the idea was ready for mass production. It was daring, brilliant, and deeply flawed. The Jetfire story is a perfect example of what happens when innovation races ahead of comprehension. The early 1960s were an era obsessed with technology and speed. America was in the space race, and words like jet, rocket, and turbo evoked images of power and progress. Oldsmobile, long seen as GM's middle-class innovator, wanted to harness that excitement, And so, in 1962, they released the Jetfire, proudly billing it as the first turbocharged production car in the world. Under its sleek, compact body lay a radical new power plant, a 215 cubic inch, 3.5-liter aluminum V8 fitted with a small turbocharger designed by Garrett Air Research. This setup promised the holy grail of 1960s engineering, lightweight performance with compact efficiency. The Jetfire's heart was its turbo rocket V8, producing 215 horsepower and 300 pound-feet of torque, astonishing numbers for an engine so small and light. To put that in perspective, this little 3.5-liter V8 produced nearly the same torque as Oldsmobile's larger 394 cubic inch engines. The turbocharger delivered up to 5 psi of boost, but there was a catch. To prevent detonation, engine knock, from the higher compression and boost pressure, Oldsmobile engineers developed a clever, if overly complicated solution: turbo rocket fluid. This mysterious-sounding substance was a mixture of distilled water, methanol, and a corrosion inhibitor. It was stored in a tank under the hood and injected into the intake manifold when the turbo spooled up. The fluid cooled the incoming air charge and raised the effective octane level, allowing the engine to run safely under boost. It was ingenious and confusing. The average Jetfire buyer in 1962 wasn't an engineer. They were middle-class Americans expecting Oldsmobile reliability, not a space-age chemistry set. Few owners understood how or why turbo rocket fluid worked. Many ignored the dashboard warning light that flashed when the tank ran low. Some filled it with water, others with antifreeze, both of which destroyed the system. Without the proper fluid, detonation occurred, leading to catastrophic engine failure. Dealers, too, were baffled. Mechanics weren't trained on turbocharging systems, and troubleshooting the complex fluid injection setup proved maddening. The result? Warranty claims piled up, and Oldsmobile dealerships quickly developed a reputation for Jetfire headaches. When the Jetfire was functioning properly, it was stunningly quick for its size. 0 to 60 miles per hour came in just over 8 seconds, rivaling much larger V8s. Top speed exceeded 110 miles per hour. Fuel economy, when driven gently, was better than most full-size cars. The aluminum V8 kept the car light, under 3,000 pounds, and its compact size made for nimble handling. Journalists praised its smooth power delivery and responsive feel, a combination rare in American cars of the time. It was truly ahead of its era, offering a glimpse of the kind of power and efficiency balance that would become common decades later. Unfortunately, the world wasn't ready for the Jetfire. Turbocharging was still exotic technology, and GM's own dealer network struggled to service it. By late 1963, frustration reached a breaking point. Oldsmobile offered to remove the turbo system entirely, replacing it with a conventional 4-barrel carburetor setup, free of charge. Thousands of Jetfires were deturboed, leaving only a handful of original cars intact today. In total, only about 9,600 Jetfires were produced between 1962 and 1963. Many of those were converted back to standard engines, making surviving fully functional examples extraordinarily rare. Although the Jetfire was short-lived, its legacy is enormous. It proved that turbocharging could work on a production car, even if the public wasn't ready for it. It inspired future generations of engineers, from the 1970s Porsche 911 Turbo to the 1980s Buick Regal Grand National. GM revisited the idea decades later with more reliable electronic controls and fuel injection, but the Jetfire was the true pioneer. Its lightweight aluminum V8 also lived on. After Oldsmobile dropped it, Rover in the UK bought the rights and refined it. That same engine powered everything from Land Rovers to Morgans for over 40 years, one of the longest production lifespans in engine history. The 1962 Oldsmobile Jetfire wasn't a failure of engineering, it was a failure of timing. The car was so far ahead of its era that neither drivers nor mechanics could keep up. It promised a new kind of motoring, compact, efficient, and high-tech, decades before Americans were ready to trade carburetors for chemistry sets. The Jetfire's combination of innovation and fragility makes it one of the most fascinating what-ifs in automotive history. In an age when most cars were content to be chrome-plated boxes, Oldsmobile dared to reach for the future and burned its wings in the process. So when we talk about the dawn of the turbo era, remember, it didn't start in Germany or Japan. It started in Lansing, Michigan in 1962, under the hood of a misunderstood machine called the Oldsmobile Jetfire. Number 4. The 1977 Chevrolet Monza Spyder, a small, sporty coupe that tried, and for a short moment succeeded, in bringing fun back to driving. The mid to late 1970s were a depressing time for enthusiasts. The 1973 oil crisis had sent fuel prices soaring. Emissions and safety regulations forced automakers to detune engines, add catalytic converters, and pile on weight. Cars that once produced 400 horsepower now barely made 150. Chevrolet's once mighty Camaro was bloated and underpowered. The Corvette was gasping under smog controls, and buyers who wanted something sporty, efficient, and affordable had little choice unless they looked to Europe or Japan. So Chevrolet took a gamble. It would build a smaller, more agile coupe to recapture some of that driving excitement, a car that could combine the looks of a sports car with the practicality of a compact. The Chevrolet Monza, introduced in 1975, was part of GM's H-body platform, shared with cars like the Vega, Pontiac Sunbird, Buick Skyhawk, and Oldsmobile Starfire. The platform had its weaknesses, particularly in quality control, but it gave Chevrolet a foundation for something sporty and stylish. By 1977, the Monza had matured. The most striking version was the Monza Spyder, a performance and appearance package that transformed the car from basic commuter to boulevard cruiser. The 1977 Monza Spyder was instantly recognizable. It featured bold Spyder graphics, often in black or red striping across the fenders and doors. It wore a front air dam, sport mirrors, rally wheels, and optional rear spoilers. The sleek fastback profile and long hood gave it proportions reminiscent of a scaled-down Camaro or Corvette. Inside, the cockpit-style dashboard and optional sport bucket seats completed the look. It wasn't luxurious, but it was driver-focused, a welcome change from the blandness of most mid-70s interiors. The Monza Spyder could be equipped with several engines, but the most exciting was the 305 cubic inch or 5-liter V8, a rarity in a compact car of its day. Base models came with 4-cylinder or V6 engines, adequate for economy. The V8 Spyder delivered around 140 horsepower and 250 pound-feet of torque, modest by earlier muscle standards, but plenty for a car that weighed under 3,000 pounds. It wasn't a screamer, but in 1977, when the average American car could barely get out of its own way, the Monza felt quick, lively, and fun. One of the Monza Spyder's greatest strengths was its balance and handling. The car's lightweight construction, rear-wheel drive layout, and low stance made it surprisingly agile. Magazines at the time like Car and Driver and Road and Track praised its cornering ability, describing it as nimble and predictable, high praise for a GM product of the era. Its recirculating ball steering wasn't perfect and braking could fade under stress, but compared to bloated contemporaries like the Monte Carlo or Ford LTD2, the Monza felt like a go-kart. Drivers could finally enjoy twisty roads again, something rare for American cars of the period. Chevrolet's marketing team took full advantage of the Monza's style and spirit. They positioned it as a car with European sophistication, emphasizing its compact proportions and responsive handling. The name Monza, borrowed from the legendary Italian racetrack, wasn't an accident. GM wanted to suggest that this was a car for enthusiasts, a spiritual successor to the sporty Corvair Monza of the 1960s. The Spider package in particular gave it visual attitude. Stripes, spoilers, and sport gauges turned what could have been another economy coupe into something aspirational. But, of course, not everything about the Monza Spider was perfect. The car still inherited many of the engineering flaws of the Vega, including rust issues, fragile interiors, and difficult maintenance, especially with the V8 shoehorned into a tight engine bay. A mechanic's nightmare. Performance, while decent, was limited by emissions equipment and a two-barrel carburetor. And as the 1980s approached, the Monza's design quickly looked dated. Still, for a fleeting moment, it gave Chevrolet something rare in that era, a driver's car. Production of the Monza ended in 1980, replaced by the less inspiring Cavalier. But the 1977 Monza Spider remains a cult favorite today, a symbol of GM's attempt to bring performance and style back during one of the dullest decades in automotive history. It represented hope that American cars could still be exciting even when the industry was under pressure from regulations, fuel crises, and competition. For collectors, the Monza Spider stands as a rare reminder that sometimes the most interesting cars aren't the fastest or most powerful, they're the ones that dared to try something different even when the odds were against them. In the bleak landscape of 1970s performance, the 1977 Monza Spider was a spark of optimism, a small car that brought back the feeling of fun behind the wheel. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't powerful, but it handled, it looked good, and it reminded drivers why they loved cars in the first place. In a decade defined by compromise, the Monza Spider dared to be exciting. And for that reason, it deserves its place in the story of America's slow climb back to performance and pride. Number 3. The 1967 Mercury Cougar XR7. This car wasn't about street fights or drag strip glory. It was about style, sophistication, and restrained aggression. The Cougar XR7 was the Mustang's more cultured sibling, the one who wore a suit to the muscle car brawl. By 1966, Ford's Mustang was a runaway success, defining the pony car category. The company saw an opportunity to bring this formula to its upscale division, Mercury, which traditionally catered to a more mature and wealthier clientele. The result was the Mercury Cougar, introduced for the 1967 model year, a car that bridged the gap between the Mustang and the Thunderbird. It wasn't just a rebadged Mustang. The Cougar had its own unique identity, its own body, and a personality that oozed class. The Cougar's design was one of the most elegant of its era, sleek, sculpted, and perfectly proportioned. Hidden headlights, the signature feature, a full-width grille with concealed headlights that gave the front end a mysterious, predatory look, true to its feline name. Sequential taillights. At the rear, 3-segment taillights blinked in sequence, a futuristic touch that became an icon of Mercury design. Long hood, short deck, the quintessential pony car silhouette, but stretched slightly for a more upscale grand touring feel. Interior refinement. The Cougar XR7 version elevated the car to near luxury territory. Wood grain trim, leather seats, a full set of aircraft-style gauges, and an overall sense of craftsmanship uncommon in the muscle car field. Designer Dave Ash and stylist John Najjar, both with prior experience on the Mustang, ensured that the Cougar exuded a different personality. It wasn't for the drag racer, it was for the driver who appreciated subtlety and sophistication. Under the hood, the Cougar shared the Mustang's basic mechanicals, but Mercury ensured more power and smoothness to match its image. 289 cubic inch or 4.7-liter V8, the base engine producing 200 to 225 horsepower depending on configuration. 390 cubic inch or 6.4-liter V8, the big block option, delivering up to 320 horsepower and serious performance potential. Transmission options: 3-speed manual, 4-speed manual, 3-speed Mercury automatic. With the 390 V8, the Cougar XR7 could sprint from 0 to 60 miles per hour in about 7 seconds, an impressive figure for 1967. But more importantly, it did so with composure. The suspension tuning was more refined than the Mustang's, making the Cougar a more comfortable and stable highway cruiser. 5. The XR7 package. The XR7 designation, first offered in 1967, represented the top trim, Mercury's attempt to blend European-style grand touring with American muscle. Features included genuine leather bucket seats, walnut veneer instrument panel, full instrumentation, tachometer, oil, temp, amps, overhead console with warning lights, chrome toggle switches inspired by Jaguars and Aston Martins. In many ways, the XR7 felt like an American Jaguar, luxurious yet powerful, elegant yet muscular. The Cougar was an immediate success for Mercury. It was even named Motor Trend's Car of the Year for 1967, a remarkable achievement for a brand new model. Buyers loved the combination of refinement and performance. It appealed to those who found the Mustang a bit too youthful and wanted something more grown up. The Cougar also helped Mercury establish an identity separate from Ford. For a brief period, it was seen as the thinking man's muscle car. However, as the decade progressed and as the muscle car wars intensified, the Cougar struggled to maintain its niche. Later models grew larger, softer, and more luxurious, eventually losing the sharp edge that defined the original. The 1967 Mercury Cougar XR7 remains a cult favorite among collectors today. It represents a unique philosophy, a car that refused to scream for attention, yet commanded respect through presence and detail. Its hidden headlights, sequential tail lights, and refined interior still stand as hallmarks of tasteful American design. In hindsight, it was one of the most balanced expressions of performance and elegance in the 1960s. The 1967 Cougar XR7 reminds us that muscle doesn't have to mean crude power. It can be delivered with grace, comfort, and style. It was the gentleman's muscle car, the perfect fusion of Detroit brawn and European refinement. While the Mustang captured the headlines, the Cougar captured the hearts of those who valued class over chaos. Today, it stands as a testament to Mercury's brief but brilliant moment in the spotlight, a time when Ford's middle child outshone both its siblings. Number 2. The 1978 Dodge Magnum XE. It was a car that straddled two worlds, the aggression of a Charger and the refinement of a Monte Carlo, a true muscle luxury hybrid. By 1978, the malaise era was in full swing. Emissions regulations and rising insurance rates had killed off the traditional high-performance muscle car. Many fans had given up hope that Detroit could build a car that was both fast and livable. Dodge's answer was the Magnum XE, a model derived from the Chrysler B-Block platform, also underpinning the Dodge Coronet, but given a longer wheelbase, wider stance, and upscale trim. While the Charger was aimed at younger buyers seeking flash, the Magnum targeted mature enthusiasts who wanted speed without sacrificing comfort. The Magnum XE combined Dodge's aggressive styling cues with luxury touches. A long, squared-off hood and short rear deck echoing Charger aggression. Front-end grille and dual headlights gave it a bold, predatory look. XE trim package included leather-like vinyl interior, plush seats, wood-grain dash inserts, and optional digital gauges. Aerodynamic roofline, sleek for a large B-block, hinting at performance without screaming muscle car. The Magnum's presence on the road was imposing. It looked fast, even when idling at a stoplight. Despite the Malaise era's limitations, the Magnum XE offered impressive performance options. 318 V8, base, modest power for everyday driving. 360 and 400 V8s, mid-tier options with spirited acceleration. Optional 440 V8, the true performance monster, giving the XE real muscle in a sea of tame competitors. Transmission options: 3-speed manual, rare. 3-speed torque flight automatic, most common. With the 400 or 440, the XE could surprise observers, moving the big coupe with respectable acceleration. Ride quality was surprisingly good for a muscle car, thanks to a softened suspension borrowed from Monte Carlo luxury setups. Handling wasn't razor-sharp, it still leaned into corners, but it balanced comfort with straight-line authority. The Magnum XE occupied a niche that few cars dared: muscle car refinement. It competed with GM's Monte Carlo SS and Ford's Thunderbird coupe variants, offering more performance than a luxury cruiser but less intimidation than a full-on Charger or Roadrunner. Sales were modest. Dodge didn't heavily market the car, and the Malaise era would soon squeeze even this niche out. Still, the XE found favor with drivers who appreciated understated aggression. A car that could carry the family, impress on the boulevard, and still burn the quarter mile if desired. The 1978 Dodge Magnum XE is largely forgotten today, overshadowed by late 70s soft cars and early 80s Malaise-era relics. Yet it represents one of the last true American muscle luxury coupes. Combines Charger-like aggression with Monte Carlo-style comfort. Offers V8 power options up to 440 cubic inches. Serves as a reminder that even in the Malaise era, Detroit could still produce fun, stylish, and fast cars. Collectors now seek the XE for its rare combination of size, performance, and luxury, making it a hidden gem of late 70s American automotive history. The Dodge Magnum XE was a muscle car with manners, a vehicle that refused to bow entirely to the Malaise era. It proved that Dodge could blend performance and refinement in one package, even if the world largely forgot about it. In hindsight, the Magnum XE is a fascinating study of what could have been, a last gasp of true American muscle sophistication before the era of bland, fuel-starved coupes took hold. Number 1. The 1969 AMC AMX, a raw, compact, and aggressive machine that flew under the radar of most enthusiasts but demanded respect on the drag strip. American Motors Corporation, or AMC, was the underdog in Detroit. By 1969, the Big Three, GM, Ford, Chrysler, dominated the muscle market. AMC wanted a unique muscle car that stood apart from their standard sedan lineup, something faster than a Corvette for a fraction of the price, a street-legal race car that appealed to performance enthusiasts. The AMX was a bold experiment, short wheelbase, two-seater, and loaded with V8 power, built to go head-to-head with far more famous cars. The 1969 AMX was compact but aggressive. Short wheelbase, 97 inches, gave it a nimble race car feel. Long hood, short rear deck, and muscular fenders emphasized power and performance. Simple, purposeful interior, bucket seats, center console shifter, minimal distractions. Distinctive styling cues like the functional hood scoops and bold stripes on performance models. The AMX looked like it could leap off the showroom floor and hit the drag strip immediately, and in many ways, it could. 290 cubic inch V8, low-end, entry-level for those wanting style more than speed. 343 cubic inch V8, a solid middle ground. 390 cubic inch V8, the true muscle option. 390 Go package with heavy-duty suspension, staggered wheels, and performance tuning. Thanks to the short wheelbase and lightweight body, the AMX accelerated like a rocket. Quarter-mile times rivaled Corvettes and Pontiac Firebirds despite costing thousands less. Handling was surprisingly competent for a muscle car of the era, though rear-wheel drive muscle cars naturally had a twitchy side at high speeds. Optional upgrades like the limited slip differential and heavy-duty cooling made it track-ready. The AMX found a niche in SCCA racing and drag strips, where its lightweight and big V8s gave it a competitive edge. Its legacy is that of a muscle car rebel, small, aggressive, and faster than people expected. Today, the 1969 AMX is sought after by collectors for its unique position in muscle car history, a car that dared to go against Detroit's norms. The 1969 AMC AMX represents a perfect storm of ingenuity, performance, and affordability. It was raw, fast, and uncompromising, challenging the muscle hierarchy at a lower price. Though overshadowed by flashier names, the AMX remains a legend of underrated American muscle, proving that you don't need 4 seats to make a statement on the street or track.